everyone, this is Melody with designbymelody.com. Today I'm here to share a layout with you. This one is titled A Father-Son Story. The photos were taken on Father's Day. I believe it was 2012, if I'm correct. I'll have to go back and look, but it was on Father's Day 2012, and it's just photos of Calen and Ernest and I walking out at a park for Father's Day. It was a beautiful day, as you can tell in the photos, the bright blue sky, and I wanted to kind of highlight that in the layout. I'm just trimming the photos down. They're two very similar photos, which is why I printed them to be smaller, and I'm gonna put them side by side on this 4x4 sheet of or cut apart that came in the kit. I did use the October Studio Calico main scrapbook kit for this. I'm just trimming off some of the space at the bottom of the photos. It's just the path. It's not that important, so I'm able to trim that off. I'm going to trim off the inside or parts of the photos just a little bit to make them fit right inside that border on the 4x6 cut apart sheet. I chose the diagonal striped yellow pattern paper as my background because Calen, if you notice, I'm not sure if I show a close-up of the photos or not, but you will see them in the end on the still shots. Calen actually is wearing a white and yellow striped little jumper, so it highlights that, and then I'm going to pull in some blue later to highlight the blue of the sky. These photos were actually taken I believe with my iPhone, but it just came out so clear because it was just such a beautiful, clear, bright day. Putting minimal glue on the back just so if I want to go back and layer some things under it, I can. Add a little bit more just to keep it down to make sure that seam doesn't show open space between the photos. This pattern piece of paper already had that white border around the diagonal striped paper. I'm using these frames were actually from Dear Lizzie die cut frames. They're from Polka Dot Party. They were actually in the August Studio Calico kit, and I really like them. I just had a hard time using them, so I'm trying to use them. I'm going to cut them apart and use little pieces of them in this layout. Obviously the frame is too small for my photos since my photos measure about 4x6 once they're placed together. Just fiddling around with it here. I probably could have measured it and made this a lot easier, but I'm just cutting it down to where you can still see the little border around the photos, but also be able to use the edge of this frame. And I believe it says I love this. Plus it has a floral. Alright, so these two papers are my absolute favorite, and I feel like these papers are what makes the layout. I just trimmed them down to be smaller, and what I've done, that blue piece that's under this piece of vellum, let's see, the blue piece is from the paper company, it's called Robin's Egg. It's white on the back and a very shiny blue on the front, but it's such a true blue, it really highlights the blue in the sky in the photos. And then the other piece, the piece of vellum that's on top, is actually called Clouds Translucent, and it's from the paper company as well. They have these on clearance at Archivers right now. They actually have had them there for quite some time. It's just the fact that they have so many of them. They still, I mean, I think I picked these up probably a good 6 months ago, but they still have them there. I checked let's see, Friday whenever I was over there. They still do have them at my store anyways. So I ended up taking that frame apart and just cutting off the little sentiment that was on it. And then I'm putting the rest of those aside just to use for other projects. Did all that work and then ended up only using the sentiment, but trial and error. This is the rest of that ribbon that came in the kit. There is another one that's kind of a green, reminds me of like an olive green almost. But then there's this one that's more of a teal, bluish green type color. I'm going to use the remaining piece here on this layout. Seemed like such a simple layout whenever I planned it, but then when I tried to do it, it wasn't working quite like I had it envisioned. And I love these little paper clips, but I have such a hard time using them on my layouts because they are so dimensional. So what I've done here is taken out the little spring in it and just used the two parts of the alligator clip. It's not an alligator clip, whatever it is. Two parts of the clothespin side by side, so it almost looks like two clothespins lined up beside each other, not one that's been taken apart. Still gives you that natural look with the natural wood, but it takes away a lot of the dimension that would have been added. Using a whole bunch of different circular elements from my stash, I felt like there were a lot of lines going on with the diagonal background, with the corners on the photos, and the 4x6 piece, and then the blue and the vellum. I just felt like there were a lot of square things and rectangular things going on, so I'm using these different circular elements to kind of balance that out a little bit. And I really like this story. It actually matched very well with the ribbon that I'm using, or the seam binding actually that I'm using here. So I'm playing around with how to make it work, and I'm going to end up using it as part of my title. And this story is from it is I have Dear Lizzie printed shapes, Lucky Charm collection, I believe is where that's from. I'm not sure if I mentioned this at the beginning, but one of my favorite parts of this layout, this layout's one of my favorite layouts in my scrapbook now. I just like that it captures the father and the son, connection, that it was Father's Day, and then just the yellows and the blues and the whites. I just love all of that. It's like a great combination in my opinion. I've decided to go ahead and move on to my title and see if I can come up with something that will fit. I still at this point did not have any clue what my title was going to be, but I knew I wanted to use that story, so I'm contemplating how to make that part of the title. And then I decided to go play around with some enamel dots for a moment, and looking at the flare badges again, and just to see if I can make up my mind on something. And again, just like I think the last 4 layouts I've done, I have not committed anything down except for the photos on their mat. These alphas are from the Doodlebug Design Teensy Type in Lily White. I like these sets because there are 3 different fonts on one sheet, so it gives you a little bit more versatility. And because they're stickers and not thickers, they're fairly inexpensive as well. So it's titled A Father-Son Story. That blue flare badge that's in the corner at the end of the seam binding says, love this, I believe. It's just another circular element to kind of balance out all the harsh corners. And I ran out of E's, I believe, and so I kind of had to piecemeal one together. I'm starting to do that. I've really tried to reduce how many alphabets and letter stickers I'm purchasing. So I'm trying to figure out titles to make work with the letters I have left, as well as just to figure out ways to use, make letters out of the remaining letters. So I know, and y'all are probably all like going crazy about this, but I know there's a clear glue that you can use with vellum. I don't have one. Probably should invest in one, but I haven't yet. And I do this continually where I'll put down the glue and then I realize it is very, very noticeable. And so I'll take it off and then I'll reposition the glue in a place that's going to be covered up, which is about where I am at the moment. But I always am like a glutton for punishment. I do it anyways. And then I have to go back and fix it. But that's okay. This adhesive is permanent adhesive, but I'm able to kind of rub it off. Now I'm committing everything down. Trimming off excess that's hanging off. And there will be quite a bit on certain things, like this border strip. I only used half of it. I'm going to use my stapler to secure the seam binding to the ends, and then once in the middle, I believe. But pretty much this is kind of a floating seam binding. I'm going to put that right under the center. If you really look for it, you probably could find it, but it's not that big of a deal. It's definitely still floating enough. I just didn't want it to hang down to the bottom. It has these natural folds in the seam binding because of how it's packaged, and they fit very well with the layout that way. So this flare badge did not have adhesive on it. It has a very deep center, so I'm having to stack some of the adhesive foam squares on there to give it something to adhere to the page with. My intent was not to add dimension, but just to be able to secure it to the page. But it's going to take me a while to fiddle around with this, and I end up going ahead and just using some of this foam tape instead of the foam squares. I could cut it to be the exact size I needed, but then it's also a little bit thinner than the foam squares, so I can stack 3 instead of just 2 of the larger foam squares, or the thicker foam squares, and get the same effect as well as have it securely adhered to the page. Just to show you how it turned out there at the bottom. Alright, now I'm going to work on, and of course I seem to run out of adhesive all the time, but now I'm going to work on adhering the middle section with the photos. And at this point I realized I was almost completely out of, or am completely out of, glue runner, so I'm just using some double-sided tape here. And just making sure the positioning of everything is correct. And I'm going to use this liquid glue from Tombow? Yeah, I think that's right. Anyways, this glue is amazing. I love it. And I actually think I'm going to have to get a second bottle. I've had this forever, and I've never had to get a second bottle, and I think I'm actually going to have to, you know. Which just goes to show I'm doing a lot more scrapbooking than I was doing before. And I use this foam tape quite a bit. Just a tip for everybody, I don't know, y'all probably already figured this out, but we and my family have two sisters, and they both or used to scrapbook a lot and do card making. But we discovered, our mom actually discovered when she was at Lowe's or Home Depot, that this foam tape is quite a bit cheaper at the hardware store than it is at a scrapbooking store. I believe this entire roll, and I've used some already, was only like $8. And I think at Michael's it runs like 20 or something like that, something ridiculous. And because the vellum's not totally adhered around the corners, it gives a little bit of a texture to the layout by having that be a little dimensional as well. Just adhering this little kind of sentiment to the photo. Honestly, I don't even remember what it says. And then here's that little piece that I cut off from the polka dot party frame. I'm going to go ahead and adhere the halves of the clothespins. I have three major embellishment clusters. I have the one up here to the top left corner of the photo. I have one smaller one on the bottom right corner of the photo. And then I have one in the bottom left corner of the layout at the end of the seam binding. It creates a visual triangle around the photos. It takes your eyes to those three different points so that your eyes make their way around the photo. And the one line from the top left corner to the bottom right corner of the photos with those two embellishment clusters actually take your vision directly through the photos. There are a lot of different design elements that you can consider and think of and really use in your scrapbooking. A lot of times I realize, you know, it kind of naturally happens, and when you're looking at it, if it doesn't follow one of those design principles, typically your eye or your brain thinks it looks strange because it doesn't follow one of those principles. So a lot of times I don't even think about those principles until I look at the layout and I realize it just doesn't make sense to me, or it's just not working with the way I see it. So then I'll think back to some of those design principles and go from there and try to restructure or restart or switch things up just to make it seem a little bit more logical to my eye. I'm debating here on journaling. Was not sure exactly what I wanted to do. At the end of the video, which we are nearing, I will show you exactly how I do a little bit of hidden journaling up on the back of the layout. Sorry, Calen he makes guest appearances in the layout sometimes, in the videos sometimes. Alright, I'm going to do that little bit of journaling up and then attach it to the back of the layout. It just didn't fit to the front of the layout, so it will be adhered to the back, and then that will be sticking out of the scrapbook 12 by 12 sheet protector, so it'll be easily accessible for anybody flipping through my scrapbook. I have this little jar of sequins, which you can see on the top of the screen here, but also I'm using a few in the lid. I actually got these at a local sewing store. I believe it was like a quarter for a ton of sequins, and they're some of them have pink tints to them, but mostly they're kind of a pearly white color. They're just enough to add a little bit of highlights to the different parts of the page, so I'm putting them around the embellishment clusters. And what I did is just kind of did a dot of glue of the Tombow Mono multi-glue and then in a couple different spaces, and then added the sequins right on top of those glue dots. Just checking to see if any of these enamel dots match up with my colors and would work. So I'm pulling in a bright blue, which again ties in the blue from the photo as well as the different blue elements on the page. Add just a few more sequins here. I love to look for scrapbook supplies in the most unlikely places, or the places you would not first originally think to look for scrapbook supplies. So we had actually went for pizza, and there was a there was a sewing store right next to the pizza place, and I walked in, and that's where I found these sequins. Alright, and then next I'm just going to do a quick little shot of how I did the journaling on the back of the page. I'm going to use this one little piece of ledger, this one little piece of a ledger journaling card for my journaling. I'm just measuring to see. I'm kind of creating a pocket with the foam tape. And basically you just want to kind of line the little pocket so that the journaling card can just slide in and out very easily without catching on things. It doesn't necessarily have to be this thick. You could have just as easily cut straight down each little strip of the foam tape to make a much thinner border. It's going to be hidden anyway, so it really doesn't matter. But if you're trying to preserve supplies, then that's one way you can do that. Alright, and the video is going to be wrapping up shortly here. If you would like to see a specific list of supplies, please visit my blog at www.designbymelody.com and let me know if you have questions or anything else that you'd like to see or ask about. Thanks for joining me. Bye!